What is up, you sexy YouTube mother lovers? I heard you guys wanted to talk about the AK-50. Now, if you're not familiar with the AK-50 project, well, it's fairly self-explanatory. It's an AK platform rifle chambered in 50 BMG. 50 BMG being the 50 cal that the M2 Browning is chambered in, the Barrett, the Serbu, you know, everything like that. Very, very big caliber. Not something you could just swap the barrel out on a normal AK on.
Sounds good, doesn't work.
But a couple years ago, we had our AK-50 V1 where we proved that at least it wouldn't explode and it might even cycle. Then last summer, we pushed our V2 prototype to actually firing and cycling magazines. Not this time. So cool, we've proved that the concept of an AK-50 works. So what's next? Well, this, I believe. This is a 3D printed mock-up that we have of kind of some of the things that we've been working on for the AK-50 V3, the third firing prototype of the AK-50. Now, just so you know, this version of the gun will be the one that looks more like a production firearm. It'll have a stock, it'll have a dust cover, it'll have a way to mount optics. Like, this will be our first attempt at a real good-looking AK-50 prototype. And while we've got a little bit of work left to go, we're a lot closer than you might think. So what we have here before us is a 3D printed mock-up of a bunch of the individual parts that we have for this new AK-50 V3 prototype. This is the stuff that allows us to see how parts function in the real world before we pay to have them machined. You see, having prototype parts machined not only is very expensive, but it also takes a long time. So having 3D models that we can test and see how these parts actually interact, you know, in physical space and not in the computer is extremely helpful. So if we get one of these contours a little wrong on one of these faces of the bolt or something like that, we don't have to wait another 3 months to get a new prototype made to then test that and hope we did it right that time. It's about as close as you can get to instant feedback. In this video, we're going to show and compare the firing V2 prototype that you may have seen from Demo Ranch and, you know, Garand Thumb videos, and show what we've been working on, what we changed, and how this is going to potentially look as a final product. And remember, if you guys want to keep seeing the progress of the AK-50 V3 prototype as it kind of comes to life in front of you on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. Plus, you get to see some of the other, you know, dumb shit we do on the channel. Now, while things like 3D printing and other technologies have helped us get the cost down, this still is quite cost intensive and takes a lot of man hours to do. And real quick, that's why I'd like to thank our sponsor,
World of Tanks. Now, I'm sure you've heard of World of Tanks by now. I found out about it by watching the Russian Badgers videos because they're hilarious. But if you didn't know, World of Tanks is a free-to-play, war-themed, massive multiplayer online game. And why I like it is that they actually have pretty good attention to detail as far as like cool, historic, and just kind of weird tanks that actually existed. And if you want to give it a shot, it's literally free. So if you click on the link down in the description and in the pinned comment, you can install World of Tanks, and also you can use my code for some free extra goodies. If you use the code TANKMANIA, you'll get an Excelsior, which is a tier 5 tank, 7 premium days, and 250,000 credits, as well as 3 rental tanks for 10 battles each. These include a Tiger 131, a Cromwell B, and a T-3485M for that Soviet goodness. Of course, the code is only applicable to new players, but go ahead, install the game, check it out. Thanks to Wargaming for sponsoring this video. Back to the content.
So instead of using this AK-50 update as an opportunity to just be like, oh yeah, we're working on the AK-50, I want to show you 3 specific things that we're working on that are going to be a major change between the AK-50 V3 and the AK-50 V2 that you guys saw. One of which is going to be the receiver, and we'll talk about all the major changes that we've done with that. Second of all, being lockup between the bolt and the front trunnion. A lot that we've changed there, and I'll get into some of like the deeper kind of gunsmith stuff there. And the third thing being cosmetics and optic mounting and stuff. So like our front handguard here, the stock that we're planning on putting in the rear, and the dust cover that we're putting on as far as being able to mount optics and, you know, actually just make this look like a real functioning AK. I mean, we've already shown that it's a functioning AK, you know, more or less. But we want to take that and build upon it, make something that we're actually proud of. But in order to properly do that, I think it's time to take a trip down memory lane, go to my other office, and let's check out the V2. All right, so let's go check it out. So we go around here, and we have another, you know, wall of goodies. Some of our toys around the shop. Some of them you might recognize from, you know, earlier videos. Some of them you might recognize from future videos that we haven't come up with. But here we have, in all its glory, the AK-50 V2. Several things stand out about this gun, many of which you've probably noticed before. Different things like, electrical tape holding the gas tube in place so that the piston can properly operate without the gas tube, falling off or binding or something. Another big thing being the receiver is made out of off-the-shelf square stock tubing from McMaster because this receiver costs machining time aside, like $80. I'm oversimplifying a lot of stuff here, but this was built with off-the-shelf stuff because what we were trying to do with this gun is to see if a stamped receiver could actually work. Because this is our first attempt at deviating from a milled receiver, which the AK-50 was always supposed to be, and trying our hand at, stamped receiver, rivets. Will this actually hold up? Will it just banana peel right off the bat? And honestly, we've almost gotten this round count on this gun to 3 digits. It's holding up. It's holding up extremely well. Especially since we didn't do anything crazy as far as heat treating this receiver or anything. It's basically just fucking off the shelf. Now, of course, we machined all the other components as far as like the bolt carrier, the front trunnion, rear trunnion, the buffer system, all that was custom done. The receiver itself, pretty bare bones. Now, the reason we were doing that is because we wanted this to be kind of a test bed, right? This wasn't supposed to look like the finished product. What we were trying to do is get data about how our unlocking was doing, how our cam groove was doing, the way that the bolt and the bolt carrier interface with each other to unlock the gun and actually cycle, go back into battery, how our feeding from the magazine was doing. Turns out we need a bit of a tighter magazine release, but semantics. But at the end of the day, we learned a lot about the way that our bolt was interfacing with the front trunnion, about our gassing, barrel length, feeding, everything, and we used that data to more intelligently come up with a pretty prototype, which we're hoping is going to be the V3. It's the gun that actually looks like a gun instead of something that looks like a backyard gunsmith developed for Fallout New Vegas. Which this gun is also in, by the way, as a mod. I think that's pretty fucking cool. So while, yeah, it looks a little rough and it is a little crude, the AK-50 V2 is something that me and my crew poured a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears into, and it gave us the most important thing possible. A really cool video of it cycling, and also the data that we needed to move on and actually work on a more finished, refined version. Because at the end of the day, what if the real AK-50 is the friends we made along the way? It's not, by the way. Real AK-50 is the real AK-50. Where AK-50? Here AK-50. It's here. It's a thing. No. You're not allowed to see that. Follow me. Well, tell you what. While we're actually out here, might as well show you the 3D printing setup we're using for a lot of the prototyping. So, what we have over here, we've got a couple of Ender 3s. I think we just have one Ender 3. Oh no, we got 2 Ender 3s here. A CR10S Pro V2, I believe. This is what we're using for a lot of the, the typical 3D printing stuff you might be familiar with. We also have over here in the corner is our resin printer setup. Now, the reason why a lot of people use resin printers, while they're a bit more complicated and expensive, they're also typically a lot more higher resolution. This is particularly useful if you're trying to get, kind of higher quality prints that you're using to base how actually machined parts will interface with each other. So that's why a lot of the stuff that we're using, especially the stuff that like the real fine details matter, resin printing is kind of superior for our purposes. So while a 3D printed 50 BMG may not exactly be a good fucking idea, using 3D printing to figure out how to build a 50 BMG, very helpful. So now back to what we have currently 3D printed of the AK-50 V3. Now you'll probably notice a bunch of differences, and right off the bat, let's just go ahead and get this out of the way. All the stuff here in black is what's done on a traditional 3D printer, while the stuff that's kind of in this weird, like, semi-fluorescent yellowish green, like, okay, to you Southerners, mellow yellow color is off of the resin printer. This includes the parts that we're specifically curious about interfacing with each other, such as the cam groove here, this little slot here in the bolt carrier that we've printed our cam groove into, the bolt itself, and the front trunnion, which you can see from this print is actually working together fucking beautifully. You can see it better from the top here. This is actually camming and rotating just like it should. It's fucking Beautiful. So this receiver that we have here, we're able to do a lot more with it, obviously, because now we're not using, just, again, off the shelf, piping and such. We're actually building a dedicated receiver for this. And one of the things that allows us to do is do a bulged front trunnion, as you see here. So one of the things that you can obviously compare this to is something like a PSL or an RPK. RPK is a little bit, I guess, better fitting in this sense, for no reason other than I like it more. What you have on the traditional AK is just a flat receiver here. On the RPKs, because they're a little beefier, they're going to have a higher sustained fire rate. Therefore, they want them to, just be built up a little bit. You have a bulge here at the top of the front, where the front trunnion is. And that's because the front trunnion is built a little thicker, and the stamped sheet metal is stamped outward to accommodate for that. So we're mimicking that a lot on the AK-50 front trunnion, as well as dropping that front rivet here down to the base here. We're going to have one long rivet going through the base of the front trunnion. Now, one thing that's worth noting is that there is about an 1.5 to 2 inches of receiver missing here. This print actually failed a little early, but it does allow us to show you, I guess, what the front trunnion will look like. And I can also just pull it out of the receiver too. That's neat. This is our front trunnion model right now. It's significantly beefier than the last one. Not that we had any problems, but beefing up the surfaces that stop the gun from exploding is never really a bad thing, I think. Got a couple things that we've worked into here for potential, dust cover, alignment and things, just to try to help everything hold zero for as long as possible. We also have our feed ramp kind of built here into the back of the front trunnion. This is just kind of to help rounds feed in from the magazine, trying to make the gun as reliable as possible. We'll fit that back in here. I just went right back in the battery. That's so cool. Another thing that's kind of cosmetic, I'm not gonna lie, it's just because it looks kind of cool, but also theoretically helps reinforce the gun, is this dimple right here. This is also on the traditional AKM, but is on things like the RPKs as well. You get this nice little sexy magwell dimple where the magazine, rocks and locks in. You got this open exposed area of stamped sheet metal. The dimple is to help reinforce it and to stop mag wobble. However, it just looks sexy as all hell, and we figured if we're going for the AK aesthetic, might as well include that on the AK-50. Now for the lockup. I love how I felt like I had to rip that out of battery, like it, was actually going to be stuck or have a spring behind it. The last prototype, we gave one last crack at the flat lug setup, which means that on the back of the triangular lug of the bolt, it was completely flat and flush, and that's how it locked up, kind of like an AR-15 does, like the back of an AR-15 lug or something like that. Once again, Papa Mikhail, dead for about 10 years and still taking us to school. On the AK, we have helical lugs. Now, of course, it's not a 3-lug setup, but it's just a 2-lug setup. But on the back of the locking lugs here, so you've got your lug here. I don't know how well the camera can see this, but the lug here on this side and the lug on this side, it looks like it might be flush, but it's actually helical. So there's a slight curve to it that kind of the bolt screws itself into the front trunnion. So it's not just hit a flat wall and then turn. It kind of like threads itself in to lock up. It's better for going into battery, better for coming out of battery. It's better for just about everything. Reliability of the gun. It's a really neat design, and apparently it works extremely well. So that's one of the things that was a little difficult to incorporate onto the AK-50 because of the 3-lug design instead of the 2-lug. But we've also made it to where these are helical as well. So these all 3 points of this tri-lug bolt are angled on kind of a helix, which is mirrored in the front trunnion. And the beginning of lockup is done by a bump pin, just kind of like the later model AKs, like some of the later AK-74s and such. It's just a pin that comes in through the side of the gun that sticks out there and initiates the camming of the bolt to get off of the flat spot in the cam groove. If it feels like I'm talking over your head a little bit and you really don't understand the terms that I'm saying here, don't worry. It took us a good minute to figure all this shit out as well. But a long story short is we are taking every opportunity that we have to kind of return to a more traditional AK style design. Reject modernity, return to Kalashnikov. Also, as you can tell, there are previous issues with cam grooves. We've beefed up the cam lug quite a bit, and the cam groove as well. If this doesn't look too fucking crazy to you, You might compare that to the AK-50 V2, where you can also see, by the way, the flat lugs here, where they were just completely, parallel here, and where we have ours currently carved out with that helix. But these, the difference in these lugs on the cam lug is pretty dramatic, I think. So yeah, hopefully that brings us a little bit more success. So again, back to the receiver, one of the things that we're also incorporating here is a hump. Giggity. A hump in the receiver. That is also very AK, by the way. This is to help us with some of the clearancing issues with using a standard AK fire control groups. Another one of those things that's keeping this gun, as true as we can to a traditional AK. Literally takes the same fire control group. Standard AK, hammer, trigger, disconnector, everything. It's actually a surplus AK pistol grip right there, currently threaded onto it. But the hump is something that is not new to AKs. In fact, the vast majority of milled AKs also have said hump there. Right there above the front of the trigger guard / mag release there. It's also something that the PKM incorporated, which was another Kalashnikov design. So we've got our aftermarket semi-auto PKM receiver here, where you can see there is a hump here to accommodate for feeding. This is also a surplus, I believe it's Bulgarian? Okay, Bulgarian PKM receiver chunk, where it also has that hump. This one's a little strange just because it's it's aftermarket stuff, so they didn't quite stamp it into the same thing because it's a little complicated geometry. But the originals were stamped into the receiver itself, and so you see that. And it's just kind of neat to see some of these features that Kalashnikov himself was clearly a fan of being incorporated into the design of something that his design inspired. Now onto the handguard, stock, and all that. Up front, you can see we have our prototype of what we're currently working with for our front handguard. Oh, why aren't you using wood furniture? Well, because wood furniture looks good on guns that were designed to have wood furniture. I am designing this gun in the 21st century, therefore I have access to CNC machines, and I don't have to chop down a goddamn sycamore tree every time I want to make a gun. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the way that this is going to look when added with everything else. Stock, we don't have an official model we're really happy with. We're working on some stuff. But one thing's for sure, like you can't just add like a full-on big long wood stock or AK stock or anything to it, because no matter, even though the gun is bigger, length of pull, like the human stays the same size. So if you had a full-on stock, you'd be out here and that's just uncomfortable and you can't shoot that. So realistically, you're gonna be somewhere right about here, which only leaves you about yay much room for a stock to attach to the rear. Of course, we don't have our rear trunnion assembly with the buffer and everything in here, but don't really need that for our purposes with a 3D print, so we just kind of left it out. Doesn't really matter. So we don't have a finished enough model for that to print yet. Still kind of working on it. If you guys have any concept art for something you think might look cool on something like this over on the Reddit, feel free to let me know. Just be sure to remember a human actually has to be able to shoot this. Kind of the goal. And then from there, we're gonna work on attaching the dust cover. We've got some stuff we're working on right now. Again, nothing that's quite ready to print, but once this thing comes together between the handguard, the stock, the dust cover, this is going to be the really first prettied up prototype we've ever done in the AK-50, and I think that's kind of cool. You also might remember that on the AK-50 V2, feeding was kind of sporadic at times. We have tested everything we have so far, and yes, it do be feeding. So we have this fixtured up. Obviously, we had to take the front handguard off for reasons that will become abundantly clear. But we have Zach here, who's kind of the unsung hero behind some of the progress that we've seen lately. And we're going to demonstrate kind of the feeding of this new prototype the best way we can in plastic. Now, here's why we had to take the front handguard off. Got to kind of boop the snoot, get the rounds out, but she do be feeding. So that's what the progress is on the AK-50, and frankly, I'm pretty happy with it. I think we're getting to the point where we're about to be able to start machining new actual metal parts and hopefully put something together. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of you who are wondering why we don't do more AK-50 updates, and probably even more of you thinking that this doesn't look like 9 months worth of progress. To those people, I say, we don't show you everything we're working on because we know this shit takes time and plenty of different iterations of shit that absolutely does not work. It needs to be refined. So we show you when things are interesting, and we show you the stuff that, actually matters. I guess at the end of the day, I will show you AK-50 progress, because it's a project, again, I'm very proud of. But I'll show you the 50 progress when I feel like there's enough that justifies talking about for a full video. Well, hopefully this video was enlightening on the R&D process and what it takes to, build a gun like the AK-50 and kind of where we're at with the project. Because when you're building a gun that's never been built before, there's really no book on how to do it. So it's a lot of trial and error and a lot of shit that just doesn't fucking work. But at the end of the day, the important part is that we keep moving forward, we keep doing cool shit, and we keep learning from our mistakes so that one day we'll actually have a finished product that's worth talking about. So anyhow, guys, that just about wraps up this video. And remember, if you want to get more updates on this in the future and all the other cool content that we do, go ahead and make sure you're still subscribed. YouTube has this weird thing where they like to unsubscribe people that have been following us forever. It's kind of a thing. We don't know why either. So go ahead and make sure that you're still subscribed. I appreciate you guys watching to the end of the video. And as always, I'll see you sexy YouTube mother lovers next time. Thanks.
Fuel is my obsession to make the perfect weapon, like Rasputin's rise to the top. But